Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of the Strokecast. I'm Bill Monroe. This week is going to be a little bit different. I'm joined by the CEO and the CAO of AbiliTrek, a Bellingham-based tech startup working to make travel better for folks with disabilities. After you listen to this episode, please check out their Indiegogo campaign that goes until April 10th. During this episode, you'll hear Daman and Kyanne talk a lot about networking. And I find this really interesting because of how this conversation actually came about. I was sitting in the Starbucks at the local hospital after finishing some outpatient PT, and I ran into Olivia, one of my awesome PTs from my inpatient days. We were talking about the podcast, and Olivia suggested I talk to AbiliTrek. Turns out she had actually gone to school with Daman, the CEO. The lesson here is that networking isn't just about hanging out at a smarmy cocktail party trying to get ahead. It's about talking to people you know and staying in touch with them. It's about thinking of ways that you can help folks you know and make more connections. And it's yet one more reason why you should treat your therapist with respect. First, well, because they deserve it. And second, because, well, you never know. So thanks, Olivia. But back to AbiliTrek. AbiliTrek actually started as a hotel booking site with a focus on accessibility. And now they are pivoting the organization into a crowdsourced travel and restaurant review site for people with disabilities. Daman Wandke is the founder and CEO of AbiliTrek. He's an MBA graduate from Western Washington University, and before he started AbiliTrek, he worked as a consultant advising organizations on accessibility matters. Daman also has cerebral palsy and travels frequently for both business and for pleasure, so he knows how difficult it is for people with disabilities to find accessible places, and that's why he created AbiliTrek. He brings to AbiliTrek his technology and business knowledge with his firsthand experience of traveling with disability. We're also joined by Kyanne Flint, who is the CAO, or Chief Accessibility Officer, of AbiliTrek. Kyanne met Daman as a student at Western Washington University and later joined AbiliTrek. A passionate disability advocate, Kyanne's motto is to defy the defined disability. She blogs her insights at Life from a Lame Perspective, where she shares her experience as a person who is wheelchair mobile and the frustrations that come from society's social barriers. Kyanne loves writing, spending time with her fabulous friends and family, exploring the outdoors, and drinking really good tea and coffee. And, of course, traveling. So, with that in mind, let's talk to Daman and Kyanne. So, welcome to the Strokecast podcast. I'm thrilled to have the AbiliTrek team on here. Let's get right into it. Daman, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and why you started AbiliTrek?
Okay, thanks for having us. So, I have a background in IT accessibility, working with a lot of companies and the federal government on making the website and other IT more accessible. I also have my MBA from Western Washington University. And in my work and also for pleasure, I have traveled a lot around the U.S. And in my travels, I have found it difficult to know what locations are acceptable and what are not acceptable because detailed accessibility information is not available online. And when you call a place, they are typically not aware of accessibility needs and don't always give you the correct information. So about 2 years ago, we had an event in my town, Bellingham, Washington, and it was a 54-hour weekend event where you went in Friday night and everyone that had an idea, then you create a team and he worked all weekend creating a business model that might work as a company. And I pitched the original AbiliTrek idea, and my team won that event.
That's fantastic. It's really interesting just how much stuff comes out of these hackathon-like events now that can really make an impact on the world. So, Cayenne, how did you get involved in AbiliTrek?
Yes, well, I first met Daman, I want to say like 4 or 5 years ago at Western. We both attended Western Washington University, and he was ending his time there while I was beginning my time there. But we crossed paths, and we knew who each other were. And when there's only like 5 or 6 of you who use wheelchairs, you find each other and you know who each of you are. And I knew that Daman was big in disability advocacy work, and I was starting my disability advocacy journey. And so that's how I first met Daman. But it wasn't until like Daman started the company that I really kind of jumped on board, and I did a little bit at the beginning and helped out. But then I was hired in September. So I've been officially working with AbiliTrek since September. I absolutely love the mission, his idea, what AbiliTrek stands for, because I have done a lot of traveling myself. And as a person with a disability, I've run into many roadblocks, whether it be transportation or hotels or airlines, just so many different avenues of travel. But like Daman said before, many people don't have the understanding of what accommodations people with disabilities actually need to have a successful trip. I'm an avid traveler for anyone to travel, but I'm also a disability advocate. So being able to advocate for people with disabilities to be able to travel as my job is amazing.
That is fantastic. I spent a lot of time traveling for work in my previous employment adventures before my stroke, and when when holidays rolled around, I suddenly found myself figuring out, okay, so now how do I actually get through security, and how do I actually deal with the airplanes and deal with checked baggage and dealing with all this stuff? So it's amazing how this stuff comes up and how many of these things that you just don't think about until you absolutely have to think about, and how that comes into play. So that's great. So I know Bellingham is a beautiful town. I love that part of the state, and it is just gorgeous up there. And the old downtown is fantastic. I've spent way too much time and money at the Califon Cafe and some other places in Bellingham. But I imagine with all the hills up there, it can be as much of a challenge to get around as downtown Seattle is too. But more specifically, as a tech startup, you don't hear about a ton of those that are outside of the Silicon Valley area or Silicon Alley in New York. So what is it like being a part of a startup in the far northwest corner of Washington State? How does that help you or hurt you versus being outside of Silicon Valley?
Well, I think Bellingham is a lot more laid back, so I really enjoy that. But I think most of the big cities have a lot of startups. In our area, we are right in between Seattle and Vancouver, BC. So I am somewhat involved in the startup community in both of those areas, as well as in the tech community in Bellingham. So one thing that really helps in most areas of business is networking. Even though I'm not in the main area, I have a lot of people that I can connect with, and I travel down to Seattle quite a bit, so I'm still involved in the startup community.
Yeah, and I suppose it's also helpful just knowing that, when it does come time to recruit folks, you have just this more virtual environment that you can work with. It makes it so much easier to communicate with folks these days. And folks who do have to be in Bellingham, you can actually afford to live there without without it getting too obnoxious.
Maybe it's definitely going up.
Yeah.
Being right by a major university in a smaller community, I find it very helpful because as an early startup, you don't have a lot of money and you can't afford the salaries in Seattle or Silicon Valley. But in Bellingham, you can get a lot of insurance, paid or unpaid, from the university, and I'm all about mentoring the younger generation and really giving them the hands-on experience that they need to build their work experience. Yeah, I typically give career advice that not what you know, who you know. Now, I can tell you the people that have gotten me and AbiliTrek where we are today. Without networking, we would not be where we are.
That networking has gotten you pretty far with AbiliTrek, and now you're making some changes to the organization and have launched an Indiegogo campaign to sort of work on the next phase. Can you tell me a bit about the Indiegogo campaign and what you're trying to do with that?
Yes, so at the beginning of March, we launched an Indiegogo campaign. We are crowdfunding in order to raise enough money to complete our service. And our service, or with our service, we have the goal of being able to map out where is and is not accessible. So it would be a rating and review site, sort of like Yelp, but for accessibility. So people with disabilities who need different accommodations can easily find access to a restaurant that they would like to go to, or if they need a bathroom or anything in the midst of their daily travels or their travels across the country or the globe. So we are using data collected by people to be able to inform other people. So as people use our service, the more data, therefore, the more knowledge that people will have access to. So our Indiegogo is out there so that we, as a startup, can afford to create our service so that it can help people with disabilities trek the globe easier. To take a hotel into example, most of the rooms are just labeled as wheelchair accessible or ADA compliant. Well, what that means for one person may not mean the same thing to another person. So with our service, we have taken the most crucial questions, and if you answer one specific question, it will direct you to another question that's specific to your need, so that you don't have to answer a ton of questions, but we want to ask enough questions that there's a good amount of data so other people can see that, yes, this is accessible for me, or no, it's not accessible for me, so I need to find somewhere else. The thing with our competitors is it's surface-based, so it's a good idea, but it doesn't dig down deep enough to make sure that it is accessible for one person, even if someone else said it was. It may not be that clear.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Because, for example, a hotel room might list themselves as accessible because maybe they have flashing, have lights connected to a doorbell for those who are hearing impaired, but that doesn't necessarily help somebody who needs to sit down in the shower.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very true.
Or talking about hotel showers for a moment, they typically say acceptable, but does that mean an acceptable bathtub or a rolling shower? And does it mean that they have a built-in seat, or do they have a shower chair available, or do you need to bring your own shower chair? Even taking a shower, those are all questions that we map out in our survey.
So what do you wish that more travel providers, whether they're airlines or hotels or rental car companies or whatever other travel providers there are out there, what do you wish more of them knew about working with travelers who have disabilities?
I think it's gonna be the theme, but one size doesn't fit all. So when you call some of these places and say, do you have X or do you have Y? They say, oh yeah, we're acceptable. But just because it's labeled acceptable doesn't mean that they're actually acceptable to that individual.
Another thing that I would love for more travel and service industries to understand is that those of us with disabilities do enjoy traveling, and I just would love different industries to understand that we are human too, and we do have that desire. We may need to do things a little differently. We may need different accommodations, but everybody has their accommodations that they need while traveling. So just making the world more accessible, and if industries could invest in their own future, because anyone at any point in time could become disabled. Like, this is a reality that most people are going to face at some point in time. So prepare for it now, invest in it now, and then it won't be a problem later.
Investing in it in the beginning, one good way to do that is include people with disability in the planning process.
Yes.
Many times when someone designs a new hotel or designs a new restaurant, people with disability are not at the table. So you have able-bodied people trying to design something to be acceptable and meet ADA requirements, but the ADA is the bare minimum.
And it's just a checklist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on the note of a lot of people with disability travel, according to a recent study, 13 million people travel with disability in the U.S. every year.
And we do have money to spend.
Yes. Yeah.
So what would you say to, perhaps other stroke survivors or other people who are new to this club of people with disabilities who may want to travel or start traveling or getting back into travel?
Okay, so preparation is definitely the key. I know it may take a little more time, but planning out at least where you're going to stay, what type of transportation, plan ahead, and you can still have spontaneous trips. Like, I've been on spontaneous trips, but I researched the places that I was staying, but not necessarily in between. But that's also something, like, when you have a disability and you may face barriers, physical barriers in your pathway of where you want to go, you have to have that spontaneous funk and be able to switch your plans or go somewhere else or do something else. So be prepared for that switch up, that change. And it can cause a bit of anxiety, but it also can be a true adventure. So I guess just your mindset of how you look at your challenge. Are you going to look at it as a bummer, or are you going to take it and learn from it and just think of it as just part of an exciting adventure? Because traveling can be fun, and I think even with the crazy barriers, it's worth it.
Yeah, I enjoyed the adventure, and it will always be an adventure. Let me add a couple tactical tips I have learned traveling as a person that uses a wheelchair. One of the hardest things that I have found is finding accessible transportation in an area you don't know. So make sure you have that planned out well. My second thought is I would call the hotel ahead of time and ask very detailed accessibility questions. If you feel like the person doesn't understand what you're asking, don't be afraid to ask for a manager. You can even ask them in the email you get them that you want. I know people that do that. And also when it comes to hotels, if they don't have what you've been guaranteed, they are required to find you a new hotel. Also, one little tip that a lot of wheelchair travelers don't know is if the hotel has a shuttle, for example, an airport shuttle, that is complimentary. Typically, those are not wheelchair shuttles. So they are required to pay for you to get to and from the airport with an acceptable taxi or some other form of acceptable transportation. One more tip when calling a hotel, a little hotel lingo for you. So if you reserve an acceptable room, that doesn't mean that you're gonna get it. They could give it away. But if you ask the hotel to block a specific room for you, once they block a room in their system, they will not give that room away. So those are a few little tips of the trade from an experienced traveler.
For anyone flying with a mobility aid, use wheelchair for example, if there are any easily moving parts, my recommendation is to take them off. So a headrest or on a manual chair, side guards, the wheel guards, if the footrests come off, my recommendation is to take them off because if you can easily take them off, they will most likely get broken off. Whoever is listening, if you haven't traveled with a mobility aid before, our airlines are not necessarily kind to any of your belongings, and medical equipment is important and expensive and for some reason just very easily broken. So if you can take any moving parts off and put them in a suitcase, I know that's an extra piece of luggage, but many times you can fly medical bags for free.
I have put in myself an overhead bin of so you don't have to put it inside your luggage.
That's true.
Another thing is, if you can remove it and you don't want to take it on board, when you get your gate check tag at the gate for your chair or your mobility device, ask for a second gate check tag or as many as you need on every removable part. That way, if they do remove a part and it somehow get lost, you have proof that they lost it.
Okay. So that's a great point. Get those extra gate check tags for each part that could come off.
Yes.
What I think is also really important these days too, and I haven't encountered this, so perhaps you have, but as more and more airlines are now encouraging people to check an extra carry-on bag at the gate, those carry-on bags then go into the standard checked luggage system to be claimed at baggage claim rather than to be claimed when you get off the plane. With mobility aids and things like that, I think it becomes even more important to double check that what you are gate checking is in fact going to be returned to you at the gate for your next flight rather than baggage claim.
Yeah. And another thing you need to think about, if you have a layover, think about that. Typically, you are the right one off and the good one on the plane. So that's gonna take up a lot of your layover. If your layover is not long enough, you could check your wheelchair all the way to your next destination and use an airport wheelchair. So I would highly recommend a long layover.
What advice would you have for stroke survivors or other folks with disabilities who may want to go ahead and start their own company to try to change the world?
Well, networking is definitely the key. So if you can be involved with more things, if that's physically possible to do, use your past networks. If in previous jobs, your schooling, friends, just
adding to Cayenne, go to networking events, really build that network, have business cards when you go out. When you do get an idea, really map out the idea, try to find advisors, try to find people that have already done it and worked in that space. If you're starting a tech startup, know that you're gonna have to pivot. Know that your first idea will not work out. And keep that in mind because at some point you are gonna have to make a very difficult decision to kill your idea or pivot your idea into something else. And that will not be easy. And if you're not ready for that, you might not do it early enough to keep your company alive.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds kind of like a lot of the advice you were just giving for travel as well, is that your initial idea may not be the way the whole adventure turns around. So you've got to be prepared to make those changes, make those pivots, and adapt.
Another suggestion where I started out is volunteering in areas that I was interested in. So find something that you're already passionate about that already exists. It may not be exactly what your mission is for the future, but get an idea of how a business is run or get an idea of how a nonprofit is run. Get a good feel for it. And it doesn't have to be for a long time. Just get an understanding of where you're going.
I agree, and that what really helped with networking as well. So really try to find those volunteer leadership opportunities. I started in leadership in high school. I was on a national advisory committee for disability-related issues. I started leading disability advocacy at my university. All of those volunteer opportunities have led me where I am today, where I have served on 2 nonprofit board of directors and started my own company. And I really learned a lot of the leadership skills early in life and built that network where I can still call on people I met at the national level back in high school or college when they might be able to help me get over the net hurdle in my company.
Are there any other projects or things that you and AbiliTrek are working on?
We also are getting into accessibility consulting, trying to help companies be more acceptable, both in travel, how to reach out to the disability market, because like you said, we have money, so encouraging companies to really find ways to reach out to our community.
So this has been great. Thank you for talking with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on your podcast.
There's a lot of great stuff in there, and you can find a list of many of the tips they mentioned over at strokecast.com, episode 6. The most important takeaway I see is for folks with disabilities to actually go out and do things. I mean, the advantage of a tool like AbiliTrek is that it gives folks a chance to plan their adventures and figure out how to do the things they want to do and go to the places they want to go. Basically, to live the lives that we want to live. But it's not just as a travel consumer. If you have a disability and have an idea for a business for yourself or a project to make the world a better place, go do it, and don't let your disability get in the way. Daman and Cayenne certainly don't let disabilities stop them from pursuing success with AbiliTrek. And that brings us to the hack of the week. This week's hack, again, a really simple one, and that's get a second cane, or a third, or a fourth, or however many you want to have. When I got home from the hospital, I wanted to be able to get up and down the stairs inside my apartment. I mean, I knew the stair climbing technique. I worked it out with my physical therapist during my inpatient days. But when I got home, I couldn't really figure out how to manage my cane when my only working hand had to clutch the handrail. And then eventually it occurred to me, get a second cane. Now I have my main canes for downstairs and for going out, plus I keep a second cane on the second floor. The strategy would work with other mobility aids too, if you can climb up and down the stairs. A more generalized way of looking at it would be to stash additional mobility or other aids in various places around your home that you need to get to so that they are ready when and where you need them, and you don't necessarily need to carry another one with you to get to that other place. So, fairly simple, but a second cane makes a lot of difference. That's it for this week. Be sure to check out AbiliTrek's Indiegogo campaign. You can find a link to that at AbiliTrek.com, as well as in the notes for episode 6 at strokecast.com. For more AbiliTrek links and to connect on social media, check out the links at strokecast.com. Do you travel with a disability? What are your thoughts and experiences on it? Tell us in the comments for episode 6 over at strokecast.com. And have you subscribed to Strokecast in your favorite podcast app yet? Now is a great time to do it. And finally, as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you next week.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.